Things that happening in China could quite literally lead China to the edge of the next Great Depression in a very short amount of time. Why does this matter? Well, China is one of the largest economies in the world. They're fighting to overtake the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. They're responsible for manufacturing 20% of the items that we use day to day. They are, without exaggeration, at risk of a complete financial collapse, which of course would affect the rest of the world. So in this video, you will see how bad the situation really was, and what you're about to hear is most likely going to be worse than expected. See, much of this begins with two words: real estate. Throughout the last few years, China experienced what many would consider to be a real estate bubble, as most of citizens preferred to invest their money in real estate as a safety net, causing the real estate market to increase double digits year over year. On top of that, the urbanization throughout most of rural China, combined with the societal pressure to own a home, caused a massive relocation to cities that offered greater opportunities and higher earnings potential, thereby further driving up demand. In fact, the country was building 5 times as many homes as America and Europe combined, and supply was still so limited that some cities would use a lottery system to decide who gets to buy a home, with some odds as low as 1 in 60, that led to 70% of the country's wealth being tied to the property market, which is more than twice as high as we have here in the United States. But there was also another problem. People believed the housing market was such a good investment that they would literally buy anything that they could get, because even if they didn't live there and they kept it empty, they could always sell in the future for a profit. At that point, property values were rising so quickly that developers would pre-sell units where the buyer would begin making payments on a property that didn't even exist yet, with the expectation that it would be cheaper to buy today than it would be in the future, since property values just keep on rising higher. But throughout China, as home buyers bought second properties for an investment just outside the city limits without restrictions, right as the government stepped in to buy the surplus inventory to keep the market stable. In addition to that, the increased building demand meant that there is less oversight in terms of quality of construction, leading of course to substantial building problems as developers cut corners to save costs to maximize profits. But there is an even bigger problem in that these pre-sale it was made, but instead the problem is that these units were not being finished. In fact, it's alleged that some of the largest property developers were taking pre-sale money, funneling them as down payments into new projects for the purpose of garnering even more pre-sale deposits and running a property Ponzi scheme by using new funds from pre-sales is entirely interest-free. The reality today is a city of broken dreams and unfinished housing projects owned by 8 struggling property developers who don't have the money to move forward, while construction has completely stopped midway through. But this is only the tip of the iceberg, as more and more projects have fallen behind in construction. Entirely due to a lack of funding, buyers have staged a mortgage boycott where all homeowners with outstanding mortgage loans will stop paying unless construction resumes before October 20th, even though this all started with the property giant Evergrande to $300 billion in debt within 4 weeks. More than 320 projects in about 100 cities were facing similar protests, roiling markets and forcing authorities to corral banks and developers to defuse the unrest. Although the damage might be too late to fix, home sales and property investments have seen a steep decline since February of 2021, while at the same time the credit market at a staggering rate, while developers borrowed more and more to keep themselves afloat. The United States Federal Reserve even came on record to say that the fragility in China's real estate sector could spread to the US if it deteriorated dramatically. So what is China doing about it? Why does the situation only seem to get worse from here? Well, China came out with a statement that they've tightened regulation by supervising customer funds and ensuring timely delivery of new units. But when 96% of the Chinese population is exposed to the real estate market and 13 million units have already been halted in the last year alone, it's inevitably going to spill over. Protests erupted outside of the People's Bank of China, where customer deposits have been frozen since April, when banking regulators said that they were investigating allegations of illegal financial activity. The authorities claimed that the problem was caused by a takeover of the bank by criminal gangs. This wasn't just one isolated event of 400,000 customers across China have fallen victim to similar bank run activities, and it's reported that a quarter of the industry's total assets are held by 4,000 smaller lenders, which often have opaque ownership and governance structure and are more vulnerable to corruption and the sharp economic slowdown. To make matters worse, even though bank deposits are insured up to about $75,000 if the bank is involved in non-compliant transactions, people could lose everything. And for China, their biggest risk is that their population loses faith within the entire banking system. The other problem for banks is that almost all of them loan money to property developers, and according to an inside source, some developers have been taking the money needed to finish housing projects. So guys, I want to know from you guys what you think. Do China really is going to get into a biggest depression, or is it temporary? Comment down below and comment yes if you want to see next part of this video, which is final, where we will end this topic.